Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being here tonight. My name is Jennifer Chaika, and I'm the Programs and Exhibits Manager at the Arlington Heights Memorial Library. I am very thrilled to welcome you to tonight's presentation, which we're presenting in partnership with the Arlington Heights Garden Club. Tonight, we are presenting Leslie Goddard as Georgia O'Keeffe. It's also a special night because we really hoped to present Leslie to do this presentation in person last spring. And of course, the pandemic did pause that a little bit, but we're so happy to be here tonight together on Zoom. Thank you again for being here. The library is very excited to be working with the Garden Club again and to present this together. And I'm happy to announce and to introduce you to Val Solosky with the Garden Club.
Thank you. We're so excited that we finally could get this presentation to the local community. Leslie Goddard is an award-winning actress and scholar who has been portraying famous women and presenting historical lectures for more than 10 years. She holds a Ph.D. from Northwestern University, specializing in U.S. history and American studies, as well as master's degrees in both theater and museum studies. A former museum director, she has authored 2 books on Chicago history, and she currently works full-time as a historical interpreter, author, and public speaker. Many of you may remember the wonderful presentation Leslie did for us a few years ago on Rachel Carson, and tonight she's going to introduce us to the world of Georgia O'Keeffe, an artist who was significantly influenced by the natural world around her. So now let me turn it over to Leslie, or should I say to Georgia.
Thank you. I heard all of you wanted to meet with me tonight. Well, here I am. This is the front of me. This is the back of me. Is that enough? You're lucky. Most people who show up at my door, I just turn them away. But all right, I'll talk. Welcome to Abiquiu. My name's Georgia. You can call me Georgia or call me Miss O'Keeffe. Do not call me Mrs. Stieglitz. That's never been my name. I never answer to that. Here in Abiquiu, I'm a newcomer. That's the lowest form of life. Now, the Spanish have been here since the 18th century. I'm just the Yankee outsider, the kook who likes to walk 10 miles a day, sleep outside on the roof, sunbathe naked. I like giving them something to talk about. You can add years to your life just by walking a mile a day. Yeah, they ought to appreciate me in this town. I've certainly spent enough money here, brought enough work to Abiquiu. When I first bought this house, it was just a pile of adobe, just a wall around a garden, broken in a few places with trees. The roof was caving in, doors hanging off, but I climbed in and walked around. And in the middle of this house, I found a good-sized patio with a pretty little well and a bucket to bring up water. And on one side of that patio was a wall with a door in it. That wall with a door in it. That was just something I had to have. It took me 10 years to buy this house, 4 more to fix it up so I could live here. And now I've painted that door. I have painted that door many, many times. I love this house. The women in town, they came and patted adobe onto the bare walls with their hands. It's what gives them that earthy sheen. So the walls in this house are made of the earth. They're part of the land that I own, and that mud surface makes you want to touch them with your hands. It's not what you expected to see. I know you probably expected to see my paintings hanging on every wall. Sorry to disappoint you. I don't hang much art on my wall. I'm not interested in looking at nothing but my art. I'm interested in what's going on outside the house. The trees and the sky and the earth and rocks. I love rocks. I collect rocks. Everywhere I go, I'm looking for rocks. black rocks, white rocks, smooth rocks. They've been lying there for a long time while the wind and the sun is making them into something beautiful to look at and to touch. It's exciting when you find one and you bring it home to treasure and to love. You want to see my art? Go to a museum. Seems like everyone these days wants to do exhibits of my art. Well, all right, I'll say, you can do an exhibit, but I get to choose exactly which paintings are included, how they'll be arranged on the walls, and what color the walls will be. I'm easy to get along with, so long as you do exactly what I want. I know I'm difficult, but that's true of anyone who lives alone. Out here in Abiquiu in the winters, I see very few people. I like it. I have no patience for people. I think I would be perfectly happy in a world with no other people in it. That probably sounds odd to you, but if I like it, who cares? But, all right. I will talk. I know what your questions are. You probably have same questions everyone else has. Why do I paint? Where do I get my inspiration? How did I even know I wanted to be an artist? To be honest, I haven't the faintest idea. I had that idea in my head back when, I couldn't have been more than 12 years old. I remember saying to a good friend of mine when we were just 12, I said to her, "What are you going to be when you grow up?" She hadn't the faintest idea. She'd never even thought about it. Well, I am going to be an artist. Looking back, it's funny how sure of myself I was. I have no idea why. When I was growing up, living on a dairy farm in Sun Prairie, Wisconsin, there were no female artists in my textbook. First thing I ever drew was a man lying on his back with his legs up in the air. I worked on this very intently. I remember licking the tip of a pencil and pressing down hard on a tan paper bag. Why was he lying on his back? Well, I had tried to draw him standing up, bending over, but I couldn't seem to get the knees right, and the legs, they didn't bend right at the hips. So I turned the bag around and suddenly he looked right. Such a surprise. It was a silly position for a man to be in, but after all that work, it felt like an achievement. I created something, even though it wasn't what I intended. You want to see it? Forget it. I destroyed it. I destroyed all my early work. I remember saying to my friends, I didn't want to be embarrassed by my student work someday when I was a famous artist. But this is how you learn. You work at it. You draw, you paint, you color. I remember one night looking out my bedroom window. It had snowed that day, and the moon was sort of glowing on the snow. And I remember thinking, how could I capture just the right color of that gleam of moonlight on the snow? I tried this thing and that. I couldn't get it right. And then suddenly I had it. If I kept most of that paper white and added some lavender gray to the sky and navy blue to the trees, I could capture just the right color of that scene. Now that was an achievement. I should have kept that. But I wasn't all self-trained. Oh, no. I took classes. I was at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago in 05, 06. Hated that. And at the Art Students League in New York. I remember they told us to try to capture nature exactly as we saw it. A copper pot with a dead rabbit next to it. I could do it capture the gleam on the copper, the sheen on the rabbit's fur. But it didn't inspire me. A lot of people were doing art like that. I did not want to spend my time doing what other people had already done. And of course, I was a woman. When I was at the Art Students League, the other students made it perfectly plain that as a woman, I could not possibly hope to succeed as an artist. Even when my work started selling, it was still, well, for a woman, she's a pretty good painter, but a woman's work really can't be on the same level as a man's. I remember once walking down a hallway at the Art Students League, and I ran into this other student, Eugene. Eugene, what are you doing? Your canvases are blocking the stairs. Aren't you going to class? All right, fine, do your own thing, but I am going to class. I know you want me to pose for you, but I'm going to class. All right, listen, today is the life study class. If the model is ugly, I will come back and pose for you. Oh, the model that day was not ugly. He was repulsive. So I came back and I posed for Eugene. We had only been working a little while when some other students came running up to say they were going over to 291, this studio where photographer Alfred Stieglitz, he was doing these exhibitions of modern art. No, I said, I thought our teachers told us to stay away from there. I remember it distinctly. They said everything that he paints is scandalous and he only does it for the shock value. All right, I'll go with you, but only to look. So we grabbed our coats, went over to Fifth Avenue, up the steps of a brownstone at 291, went up a tiny elevator. Stieglitz was coming out of a dark room as we entered, holding a dripping photograph in his hand. He glared at us through his pince-nez. Well, the boys started going around to the pictures, asking him questions about them, egging him on, goading him. He kept getting more and more worked up. No, he would say, you're not seeing the art. You don't have the vision. The whole art world must expand its vision. He kept getting more and more worked up, and I kept backing up further and further, waiting for the volleys to subside. The paintings and drawings there did not look like very much to me. They were just these lines and squiggles. Some artist named Rodin. They were of no interest to me. But listening to Mr. Stieglitz talk, I thought, I would rather have that man like something, anything I did, than anyone else on earth. Well, Eugene was right about one thing. I did become a teacher of art in a girls' school, but I stopped doing my own art. At one point, I just packed up my brushes, all my oils and canvases. I just stopped arting until one day I went to visit my parents. They were now living in Williamsburg in Virginia. And my sister Ida said she was going to take a class that summer at the University of Virginia. University of Virginia, I said. They only admit men. How'd you work it out? She told me that for summer classes, they would admit women. I signed up for that class as soon as I could. That class was taught by a beloved eccentric, Ellen Beeman. Well, I thought, I'm an eccentric too, so why not? Now, Beeman was a disciple of Arthur Wesley Dow. And Dow's theory was the purpose of art is not to duplicate reality. If you're painting a rabbit, it's not about the rabbit. It's about the composition, the way the forms work with each other. Now this This was like giving a pitcher of water to someone dying of thirst. Art is about more than its subject, pure radicalism in 1912. If you had seen me, you would have seen a light bulb go off over my head. This was the way forward. This was something I could teach. And I did. I got a job teaching art at a little school down in Texas. The students there had very little money, but they were open to art. I told them each, I want you to take a look at the piece of paper sitting on the table in front of you. That paper is your open space. Your goal is to fill that space in a beautiful way. It's true, isn't it? About everything we do, the way you address an envelope, the way you place items on a table, the way you do your hair, everything can be done with beauty and thoughtfulness. I wrote to my friend, Anita, who is still living back in New York. Dear Anita, I have decided I am done copying what others people have already done. I have packed up all my canvases, all my oils and brushes. I'm beginning new using only charcoal. I've eliminated all color and am going to compose only in gray, paper and charcoal. I'm not going to use any color until it's impossible to say what I want to say in black and white. I spread paper out all over the floor and started crawling around, composing shapes in charcoal, ovals, hollow balls, ribbons of light and dark set on a diagonal. I drew until I had cramps in my feet from crawling around. If anyone had seen me, they would have thought I was a raving lunatic. But Degas and Cézanne, Van Gogh, they were all raving lunatics too. No one thought anything about it. I wrote to Anita. Dear Anita, I'm sending you here some of my charcoals. Tell me what you think, but don't show them around very much. Dear Anita, I hardly know what to say. When I sent you those charcoals, I certainly never expected you would show them to anyone, especially not to Stieglitz, of all people. I admire your courage. I never would have been able to do that. Did he really say, at last, a woman on paper? Now, I'm glad they meant something to him. It makes me want to keep on. And here I had almost given up the whole thing as a fool's game. Not long after that, I was having lunch one day at the Columbia Teachers College, and another student came running up to me and said to me, "Are you Virginia O'Keeffe?" "No, my name's Georgia O'Keeffe, different state." "Oh, well, I'm pretty sure it was a Virginia O'Keeffe whose drawings are up in a group exhibition at 291. 291? 291? They had to be mine. So I threw on a coat, ran over to Fifth Avenue, upstairs to 291, opened up the door. Now, Stieglitz was not there, but my drawings were. My liquid charcoals evenly spaced on soft gray walls. Light was coming through a skylight and bathing them in this sort of soft glow. They had never looked so beautiful. Then Stieglitz entered. "Mr. Stieglitz, these drawings, you must take them down." "Because I did not give you permission." "But I didn't. But I don't. But they're not. Take them down. Ah. Will you try arguing with Stieglitz? See how far you get. He told me, you have no more right to withhold those drawings from the world than a parent does to withhold a child from the world. From then on, it was Stieglitz. He was the first, really the first, to see the value in my art. And in me. Yes, he was married with a daughter, but by 1918, I'd packed up everything and moved to New York so I could be with him and work, not planning to fall in love, just to work. Still, he was a photographer. It was probably natural he would want to take photographs of me. Hands just so, head just so. His photographs were soft, dreamy. He could produce in a photograph the exact visual equivalent of the hands or the eyes of a lover as they move over the body of a loved one. He told me that he loved my hands, he loved my neck, my torso, my arms, my legs, my navel, my armpits. In the years we were together, quite a few years, he must have taken maybe 500 photographs of me in all stages of dress and undress. I don't know what I thought he was going to do with them, but I did not expect that he would exhibit them, all of them, publicly. I thought I could never face the world again. Not about the photographs as art. As art, they're beautiful, but at what they suggested, especially the nudes about me, showing the world I was just a sexual being, just Stieglitz's mistress, which by then I was. But no, more than that. Within a few years, he had left his wife and we'd moved in together. He asked me, what did I want most? What did I want most in all the world? And I said to him, most in all the world, I want art. I want a year to do nothing but art. He made it happen for me. I learned everything I could. I remember once seeing a teacher who put a phonograph up at the front of a room and played classical music while the students drew, interpreting the sound on paper. This was something new. The idea that music could be translated into art, that sound is like line, but music is, after all, essentially abstract. Why couldn't it inspire art that was equally abstract? Stieglitz exhibited some of my abstract paintings, but of course the critics had no idea what to do with these. What's going on here? Just lines and shapes? They couldn't find anything recognizable in them, nor could my friends. A friend of mine told me that she liked abstract art, so I brought her one of my pictures one day. She looked at it and she said, "Is it watermelon?" No, it is not a watermelon. It's an evening star. Well, it's not a star. It's the way that I feel about a star. Oh, she said, were you feeling sick to your stomach that night? All right, fine. Then I will paint something real. I will paint something out in the world as real as possible. How about flowers? You don't know what to do with my lines and shapes? Fine. This is a poppy, but not without meaning. Have you ever looked at a flower? I mean, really looked at a flower. No one does, we haven't got time. We buy them for our friends when they are sick. We put them on tables, but we never really look at them because we don't have time, and to see something takes time. A tiny little flower would get lost in the size and the busyness of a city like New York. So I made my flowers big, like the huge skyscrapers, the ones that are these days going up all around us. It's an iris, a black iris. When you live in New York City, you can only get a black iris like this, maybe 2 weeks out of every year. And that black, it's so deep, it's so velvety. No, it is not a metaphor for a woman's private parts. Obviously, a case of suppressed Freudian desires. Why do people bring everything back to sexuality? But they did. Oh, yes, they did. Some of my favorite reviews of my flower paintings said, Miss O'Keeffe has beautified the essence of what it means to be a woman. And it is female, this art, as only is the body of a woman when dense, quivering, ecstatic life is felt throughout her. There are reams of this stuff. I saw a reporter and I said to her, could we talk? Could I explain it to you, please? My paintings are based on the fundamentals of composition. It is a product of my training. Art consists of putting the right thing in the right place. I could not wait for her article to come out. Stieglitz, look, here it is. She got it. Listen to this. Ms. O'Keeffe explains that art consists of putting the right thing in the right place. And as others have noted, the essence of womanhood permeates her paintings. All they were seeing was this womanliness. I'm not the first female artist, for heaven's sakes. There's Mary Cassatt, and I've painted plenty of so-called masculine subjects. I've painted barns. I've painted roof shingles. I have painted skyscrapers. Nothing essentially womanly about any of those. I made you look, really look at a flower. And when you did, you went and hung all your ideas about flowers on my flowers. You talk and think about flowers as if I talk and think about flowers the way you do. And I don't. Yeah, maybe I shouldn't have let Stieglitz do those nude photographs. I'm not ashamed of them. As art, they are beautiful, but they meant all people saw in me was sexuality. Admit it, you might have expected the same thing. Maybe you expected me to come out here tonight wearing a silk kimono. Well, sorry to disappoint you. I mostly dress like this. I wear black a lot of the time because it's practical and I like it. I wear flat shoes because they're practical and I like them. Do you want to know why I often wear my hair in a scarf like this? Because it's practical and I like it. So no, I am not going to stand up here and talk about what it means to be a woman working in a man's field. You do not need to know that I am a woman to appreciate my art. You don't need to know anything about me. You don't need to know I was born in Wisconsin in 1887, married Stieglitz in 1924. Yes, I married him. Didn't want to. Marriage never held much interest for me. I've always been able to earn my own living, but This was the 20s, and we had been living together for 6 years. So one morning, we took a ferry across the Hudson River to New Jersey, and a justice of the peace married us. I was 37, he was 60. But I never agreed to change my name. Why should I take on someone else's favorite name? When people called me Mrs. Stieglitz, I would say, it's Miss O'Keefe. I like getting what I've got on my own. Stieglitz was a funny man. Stieglitz always insisted on wearing a particular brand of shirt, a certain type of socks or shoes or underwear. I would walk all over town to find these special kinds for him. He always had to be around people. I needed solitude. I wanted to travel. He never wanted to go anywhere. He was an old stick in the mud. And I wanted a child. He didn't. He said to me, but you'll never be able to create art if there's a child always underfoot. So that was that. And summers we spent with the whole Stieglitz clan up at Lake George. I know I was hard on that family, but they were hard on me. I finally said to him, Stieglitz, I love you, but I have to keep something of myself, or I'll have nothing left to give you. I know you won't travel, but I have to. I'm going away this summer. I don't know. Mabel Dodge Luhan said I could stay with her in New Mexico. Perhaps I'll go there. So in 1929, I spent the whole summer for the first time in New Mexico. I'd never seen anything like it. And as soon as I was there, I knew this was my place. It fitted to me perfectly. There's just something in the air out here. The sky is different. The stars are different. Even the wind is different. I shouldn't say too much about it because then all of you will get interested, and I don't want you to get interested. I wrote to Stieglitz, Dear Stieglitz, I feel so much better out here. My health is splendid. I eat 3 kinds of lettuce, all of it fresh from the garden. I've been tramping around on foot, riding horses. I learned to drive a Model A Ford wildly over these hills. I've climbed and tramped into every hill I could find. There's nothing I can say about it except for me. This is the only place. From then on, I was always on my way back. First summer that I was in New Mexico, I was picking up rocks and pieces of wood and bones where there were rocks and wood and bones to pick up. Beautiful white bones, clean, elegant. Soon I had a whole pile of them. And when it was time to go home, I was wondering, well, what could I bring home with me to work on? And I could not think of anything but a pile of those bones. Stieglitz, as soon as he saw it, said, what are you going to do with those? And what do you mean, what am I going to do with these? I'm going to paint them. These bones, they are as beautiful to me as anything else. They speak to me of the wideness and the wonder of the world. So that fall, that very first fall, when we were back up at Lake George, I painted my very first skull. First, I did a horse's head. Then I did a cow's head against a blue sky. You know, I remember in those days, all the men were talking about the great American novel, the great American play, the great American anything. And I thought, a lot of these men, they don't know anything about America. A lot of them have never even been across the Hudson. So I'm going to make an American painting. I am going to make a red, white, and blue painting for all these men who never even travel across the Hudson River. So I did. White skull, blue sky, red strip on each side. Amused me, but I don't think anyone else caught on to it for a while. The other thing that I always collected were these little calico flowers. They used to sell these in all the country stores. Nothing fancy, but some of them are quite pretty. I remember looking at one of them one day when the front doorbell rang. There was a skull sitting on the table, so I took that flower and I stuck it into the eye socket. And once my visitor had gone and I came back, there was something about that flower sitting there jauntily in that eye. So of course, I painted it. In 1937, I bought my first house in New Mexico, out at Ghost Ranch, about 45 minutes from here. Just a simple U-shaped adobe house built around a patio, big windows out back, so I could look out on those cliffs. Well, you stand there in the patio, and out there, about 10 miles away, is this distinctive blue mountain, the Pedernal Mountain, a perfect blue mountain. So I started painting it. I would paint its bluish top, its reddish slanting sides. I painted that mountain against a blue sky, against a gray sky, against the stars. It's my mountain. God told me if I painted it enough, I could have it. I tramped all over Ghost Ranch, listening for what spoke to me and then painting it. Just outside the door of my house, there are these two hills. They make a sort of a V shape. I passed that V many times. It always spoke quietly to me. So one day I just took out a canvas and I painted it. Such simple shapes, it hardly even seemed worthwhile, but I painted it like two red arms reaching up, holding up the sky. The same way I was holding up Stieglitz. I still spent 2/3 of every year with him in New York. He had a heart attack, but got better, went back to working in his new gallery, working with a writer on his biography, having his usual love affairs. But he kept having heart trouble. And finally, in 1946, he died. You never expect that you're going to miss someone as deeply as it ends up you do. I missed the response that we each had to each other's work, the way he supported my work in the beginning and I supported him at the end. Well, it took a few years to go through all of his photographs, all the paintings he owned, distribute them all to museums. Well, that's done now. There was nothing left to keep me in New York. From now on, my home would be New Mexico. And now at least I can paint what I want, what I really, really want. You know, when I first came out to New Mexico, I thought maybe someone could show me how to paint the landscape out here, but I never found that person. I just had to sit down and try it for them myself. I mean, someone could show me how to paint their landscape, but they couldn't show me how to paint mine. First of all, there's the expanse, the vastness of the land, and then there's the light of the cliffs, the light hitting the landscape, and all of it intensified by the colors. The colors out here are the same colors that if you mix them in the earth with oil, you get paint. All the earth colors of a paint box are out here, from reddish orange through buttery yellow and deep, rich purple. Color comes easily to me. I don't even like to think in words. Words are tricky. Words are slippery. They're indistinct. Pigment is so much superior. This is why I almost never talk about my art, because I do not like to think in words. For instance, people often ask me, why do I always paint pelvis bones? Well, when I was first out here, there were always pelvis bones all around, always underfoot, seen but not seen, the way these things often are. So I started collecting the pelvis bones. And when I started painting them, I discovered I was most interested in the holes in the bones and what you can see through them, especially the light. From holding the bones up on a sunny day against a blue sky, these bones are the most beautiful against a blue sky. You know, when I was a girl, I used to eat around the raisin in a cookie. I would eat around the hole in a donut. I would save that raisin or that hole for best and last. I think that's why when I started painting pelvises, I was so interested in the holes in the bones. Well, after a while, I thought, it's all well and good to always have a white bone against a blue sky. I better try something else. So I did. I did a red bone against a yellow sky. That wasn't too bad either. Now, of course, critics had no idea what to do with my bone paintings. What's going on here? Dead animal bones? You remember when I started doing flowers, everyone decided my flowers were Freudian because Freud was on everyone's mind. Well, now surrealism was all the rage, so everyone decided my bones must be surrealist. Why is it so hard for them to think I could come up with this stuff on my own? I never bother to follow what other people are doing in art. You find what speaks to you and you paint it. I cannot tell you why I paint pelvis bones and skulls. To explain it to you, I would have to do another painting, and then it would just be another painting with a dead animal bone in it. And then where would we be? The meaning is there in the painting. I do not have anything more to say to you than what I said in the painting. These bones, they do not represent death, not to me. They're very lively. It never even occurred to me they have anything to do with death. They speak to me of that wideness and the wonder of the world around you. All I can tell you is what I have had to say in my paintings. For instance, here's another example. I'm afraid of flying, but once I'm up in an airplane, I enjoy looking out, seeing the world from up above. One day when I was flying back to New Mexico, I looked out the window and the sky was the most beautiful, solid white. It looked so solid, I thought I could walk right out there to the horizon. I could just open up the door and walk right out to that thin blue line of the horizon off in the distance. It was wonderful. I could not wait to get home and paint it. Well, the next time I was flying, I looked out the window again, and this time the sky was completely filled with small oval-shaped clouds, all more or less the same size, like stepping stones spread across the sky. I've tried to paint that, but I don't have any canvases that are big enough. All of my canvases are much too tall and not nearly wide enough. I do not know how I will get a canvas that big and that wide stretched. It will have to be at least 24 feet wide and 8 feet tall. But I'll do it someday. That is why I paint. I don't think it's a gift. I don't think I have a great talent. You have to have more than that. You have to have ability to see the world that's around you, to respond to what you see in that world around you. It takes that and a lot of work, a lot of very, very hard work. One paints, I suppose, because it's the most interesting thing one can do in life. All the other days of your life, you're just going through your day. You're doing the things you have to do to keep your life going. You weed the garden. You bake a new kind of bread. You meet a friend for lunch. You have to go shopping. You might even enjoy doing these things. You think that you have to take a trip to Morocco or invite friends over for dinner so you don't go mad living alone. But all the time that you're doing these things, you're just hurrying through them because you want to get back to the painting because that's it. It's what you do everything for. I do not know why it is this way. I cannot explain it. I just know that the days you paint are the best days. Painting is the reason for everything else on earth. So that's it. That's all I have to say. So go on now, get out of here. Go outside in nature and see what the world has to say to you. And then fill your space in a beautiful way. Thank you all so much for listening. I'll finish up with that. Good night. All right, but of course, don't go anywhere because this is the point where I can open it up for questions for anyone. So if you all have questions, go ahead. If you move your cursor, you'll see that little icon that says chat. Go in there and feel free to type questions into there. While you're thinking of questions, I just want to mention to you, if you're curious about where I am, I'm going to take off my headscarf so you'll know I'm going back to being Leslie. This is actually, you might have guessed, it's my virtual backdrop. This is an image of Georgia O'Keeffe's sitting room in her house in Abiquiu. If you think it sounds like Albuquerque, it does, but it's not the same place. Abiquiu is a distinct city from Albuquerque. One thing I love about this, and it's such a good indicator of her love for nature, that back wall used to be mostly an adobe wall with a small window in it. She had that whole wall ripped out and reinstalled as just one big window so she could see that magnificent tree that you might be able to make out in the background. So, all right, so questions. Sharon has a question. Do you know whether or not Georgia was as expressive and dramatic as you portray her? Here's what I'll say to that, Sharon. Yes and no. I have seen, and one of the great things about doing Georgia O'Keeffe is that she lived a long time. She passed away in 1987. So we do have video. PBS did a documentary series about her. In that documentary, she's not nearly as expressive and dramatic as I'm being here. The reason I did that, though, is twofold. Number one, because we do have stories that she was actually pretty prickly in her older age, especially when people showed up unannounced, because people did that all the time. And she really would go out there and say, I heard you wanted to see me. Here's the front of me. Here's the back of me. See you later. Partly because she was a private person and they were, constantly on top of her. But here's the other thing. When I started this portrayal, I was really trying to just impersonate the person that I saw on the television, which I do think was really her. But it didn't seem to capture for me the drama and expressiveness of the paintings, if that makes sense. And I wanted a portrayal that wasn't just an impersonation, although, representing a character is obviously something you want to do. But I wanted to capture that depth of emotion that I think is always there in her paintings. So it was a bit of a dramatic choice, a bit of it rooted in her own prickly personality towards the end of her life, if that makes sense. So there you go. So thanks. Sherry says, oh, thank you, Sherry. It's very nice. Sherry says, I used to be a picture lady and present in the classroom. For that, I always liked Georgia O'Keeffe. Sherry, that's such an interesting point you make. Because I was introduced to Georgia O'Keeffe first from a picture lady when I was in school. And the thing that I loved about Georgia O'Keeffe right from the beginning was that the flowers, the depth of the color in the flowers, and the way they almost seem to come alive in the flowers. And I've always thought there's something that's really accessible about her art that way. But at the same time, there's a depth to it that, as I got older and was coming at her art from a very different place, I saw different things. That ability to zoom in on something is a remarkable artistic technique. And she had this ability, with the flowers, she was zooming in so tightly. I mean, the flowers explode beyond the edges of the canvas. There's something very, it's moving towards abstraction. And she does this in her, you might be able to see on the wall back here, they actually had hanging that day, that one of her sky paintings. It moves to the point of abstraction, but it's perfectly realistic. That sort of getting at the essence of the beauty, the artisticness of something you see in the natural world, making you see something natural in its artistic shape, it kind of blows my mind when I think about it. So I'm glad you say that. Esther says, around what years did she live at Abiquiu? She first bought, for those of you, if it wasn't clear in the portrayal, she had two houses in New Mexico. One of them was her summer cottage at a place called Ghost Ranch. It's a small house. It's still there. It's not open for museum tours. It's pretty tiny. She loved Abiquiu, but it didn't have a place where she could garden, right? So all the gardeners among us will understand that. So the house at Abiquiu, she purchased in, what was the year? It was in the 40s. 40s, it was, I'd have to look it up, mid 40s at some point, but and then she lived in that house until just before the end of her life. Towards the end of her life, she actually did have to move to a facility in Santa Fe. But that house, by the way, it's never been, after she left it, it was simply preserved. So it is open as a museum today. One of the things she loved about it is that it had this very ancient irrigation system with a wide side yard where they did sort of once a week flooding irrigation. So you get this wonderful amount of water. And so she grew things. And one of the things they do there now is to, they have recreated her garden. In fact, in the summertime, you can go online and there's a webcam and they will show you the garden as it's progressing. And not only was she growing flowers and trees, she was amazing at the vegetables that she grew. She ate a lot. Maybe this is a key to the long life, right? Again, for the gardeners, she ate a lot of her own foods. Debbie says, did she not get the Presidential Medal of Honor? Oh gosh, Debbie, you know what? I would have to look it up. I believe she did. Yes. One of the many remarkable distinctions she got, I'd have to look it up, but it raises a good point. To tell you what I can say is that she's been recognized for her work as an artist above and beyond what many, many female artists do. The number of female artists who achieve sort of household name recognition is pretty small. I think the average, the last time I looked it up, the average, well, do you want to guess what percentage of art collections in major American art museums are by female artists? It's somewhere around 10 to 15%. And it's not a situation where any of us want quotas. I mean, the art world is in many cases not something we're going to want dealt with that way, but it does mean that recognition for female artists is something we really should work for. Georgia O'Keeffe's painting, and let me see if I can pull it up again. The painting that's known as, it was a white flower that I showed. It's Jimson Weed White Flower #1. Here it is. This sold at auction just about 5-10 years ago for a new record for amount spent by a work by a female artist. It sold at auction for $44 million. And that's not only a record, it was about triple the previous record, which I think was 11 million. Although just recently, work by, I think it was by Frida Kahlo, sold for somewhere in the range of 30 million. So it's remarkable that she has the recognition that she did, and that her artwork can be, like I mentioned before, it's very accessible on one level, but there's a real depth to it, and a real that whole idea of, I'm just blown away by that idea that you can take something in the natural world, you can take a flower, or she did this with shells, she did this with leaves, and just boil it down to its essential line and structure. This one is pretty realistic, but sometimes she zooms in so much, it just looks like a, maybe a pistol or something in the middle. It's a remarkable way to spur a new way of looking at the world, not to mention that her colors have that depth. So things like that. Denise says, love the pin. Did you get it from her museum? I did. I don't know if I can show you. This is a replica of an actual pin that Georgia O'Keeffe owned. It was made for her by, do you know the Alexander Calder, the guy who did the mobiles? He created it for her. It is actually, what I'm going to show, here's a picture of Georgia herself wearing her pin. It actually is, if we turn it on its side, it's her initials, the initials OK. She liked to wear it sideways because it looked more abstract. The Georgia O'Keeffe Museum in Santa Fe has an artist who creates pins. You can get any initial. I just happened to get the O and the K and put them together. Jean says, did Georgia have any rights to the photos of her taken by Stieglitz after his death? She did inherit his entire estate. So essentially, yes. Stieglitz is a fascinating character. And actually, one of the reasons I chose Georgia O'Keeffe is because so many of his paintings, or there's a large collection of his paintings at the Art Institute of Chicago. His painting, his photographs, he really does capture how much he loved her, but he did seem to push kind of sexualized images of her, and certainly to encourage sexualized readings of her flower paintings, partly because that drove up the value of her work, and the artwork is intensely driven by financial issues. The problem was that flowers have been considered something that was appropriate for a woman to paint. In the 19th century, there were a lot of women doing, little flower miniature paintings, or painting on china, or just painting flowers. And I think O'Keeffe was genuinely drawn to the natural world. She responds to the natural world so beautifully. She painted flowers all through her career. The problem was it encouraged people to see her as just a female artist. And because what she was doing with abstraction, if I can go back to, let me see if I can pull up the iris, it encouraged these real sexualized readings of her paintings. How much she was sort of tongue-in-cheek protesting that kind of a reading. It is true, when you zero in on a flower, there often is a sexualized component to it. I mean, we're looking at, the sexual features of a flower, but O'Keeffe sort of strained against an interpretation of her work purely as the work of a female artist. She wanted to be recognized as a great artist, and to say that great art can be created by anyone regardless of gender. And that was a big stretch. So there you go. Oh, Jen, thank you. Jennifer says, it looks like she lived in Abiquiu beginning in 1943. Thank you. Karen says, has this portrayal inspired you to paint? Me, Leslie, yes, but I will say, I was doing some work with color and with painting, and it mostly made me realize what an incredibly challenging thing it is. That's not where my talents were. But you know what it did even more? Encourage me to see things in the natural world in a much deeper way. It's hard for me now to buy flowers and just, put them on the table as a centerpiece. You really do. You have to look at them and be in awe at the beauty there. And even something like a rock, and she collected rocks. She really did. If you go to her house, there's rocks all over the place. But when you think about what it takes to create a rock and to smooth it to that beautiful kind of silky smoothness, it's full of wonder. And so she inspired me that way more than anything. Nancy says, did she display on her walls her work as well as Stieglitz's work? She displayed, I know at some point she did have photographs of his on the wall, but she did not ever display a lot of art. When you go to her house, not that that's all she ever had is what you see in her house in New Mexico. It was a very few well-chosen pieces. There was an artist named Arthur Dove, whose works were also, he worked in the Stieglitz Circle in New York when O'Keeffe did. She had a few of his pieces out. She bought certain pieces of modern furniture. She had an Eames chair. You can see some of them in this. It was almost like her lifestyle was as modernist as her art. It was very streamlined and just a few very carefully chosen pieces that spoke to her. I think more than anything, what she wanted, the art in her house, was the big windows looking out on the trees, the cliffs that she loved, the landscape that she loved so much. So there you go. All right. Anything else? It looks like we're about at the top of the hour, so maybe that's a good moment to finish up.
Yes, we are at time. And Leslie, we cannot thank you enough. That was fantastic. And of course, you saw lots of thanks, lots of great performance comments coming in. We'll send everybody a survey, so please share more comments with us after. But mostly, we are so happy we all had the time to spend together tonight to finally celebrate Georgia O'Keeffe with Leslie after 1 year of waiting. So thank you to the Garden Club members. Thank you, library attendees. Thank you, most importantly, Leslie, for being here.
Thank you. Have a great night, everyone.
Have a great night, everybody.